Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. And for a second week in a row, we're on our new home of Football Daily. Welcome over from Euro Football Daily if you used to love this show. There is so much to discuss on this week's episode. And of course, I'm joined by Mikey McCubbin and Henry Hill. Guys, we're going to start with last night's game, actually, the Milan derby. Henry, big result, Inter 2-0 up. What did you make of it?
Quite a partisan dress code.
Yeah, very much so, very much so.
We did, where's your Milan shirt?
We didn't coordinate in advance.
Did not get the memo, as per. I thought that AC Milan looked like a rabbit in the headlights. I'm actually quite pleased with the result. I think it's really important that Inter get through for this final. I think they've got just more firepower and quality across the board. I love DiMarco. I love their wingers. Their fullbacks, I think they're fantastic. And actually, Dzeko, what a professional forward. I mean, it was great. It was a really excellent away performance by Inter Milan. But I think they just... Inzaghi is just such a coach, cup coach boss. If he achieves top four, Coppa Italia and a Champions League final, this is someone they were saying should be fired a few weeks ago. That's an insane season. But yeah, just a quick word on AC Milan. I saw a good interview of Maldini on CBS beforehand where he said, they're ahead of their development in where they expected AC Milan to be at this moment in time, and they had to kind of live up to the moment. They didn't quite do that yesterday, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it next week again. But still, for AC Milan, this AC Milan team to be in a semi-final is impressive. And he said now is the time to invest. So I hope that they do capitalise on the momentum they've got now, lay out a new deal, and I hope they can put themselves in a position to be in more semi-finals. Because we saw yesterday with all the tifos and the energy, etc. These are two teams that belong at the top table of European football. That was amazing. But yeah, as a game, Inter Milan deserved winners.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To have two European giants that bring so much prestige to this stage of the competition, having had so many years in the doldrums in the Champions League, really did add to it. McCubbs, I mean, we've talked about it for years now, Milan's reliance on Rafa Leao.
Yeah.
But was it even more shocking to see on this stage just how little there was on the pitch for them?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of been saying it all season, haven't we? Without Leao, that attack doesn't really offer an awful lot. We would have hoped that De Ketelaere would have, really made his mark on this team by this point, and he hasn't. And Brahim Diaz has had a really good second half of the season, but he can't really do it on his own. Salamakis is too inconsistent. Messias just isn't at the level, I don't think. No. Giroud, has done well, but didn't really have much of an influence on this game, and was tough because they were playing an Inter defence that was on top form. All three of the centre backs had great games, and conversely, Milan's usually very steady back line got picked apart, didn't they? And I thought it was telling that, David Calabria, who was, it really embodied their performance over two legs against Napoli and almost completely silencing Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, just got, completely dominated by Dzeko for that opening goal, and I feel like that kind of took the wind out of their sails in that moment. Tomori had a poor game, didn't he? Kier got taken off on 55 minutes. Krunic, who was really underrated against Napoli, was perfect. The midfield got overrun as well, and I barely saw him get a tackle in all game. And I guess it was just a case, I think, as well, of Inter are just in great form at the moment. They're one of the form teams in Italy. Lukaku, didn't start this game, but has been in great form, hasn't he? Lautaro's been in fantastic form. Çalhanoğlu at the base of midfield is keeping Brozovic out of the side and had a great game here. Should have scored. Hit the post, didn't he? So all round, just this Inter side are just cooking at the moment. So excited to see, if they get through, what kind of battle they can put up against Man City or Real Madrid, because I think, they obviously go into that as underdogs. But like Henry was saying, Inzaghi is a great cup manager. We saw what they did. Well, the kind of battle they put up against Liverpool at Anfield last season. I thought they were really impressive in that game. So, I don't think you can completely count them out, even though they are very heavy underdogs.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully Rafa Leao is back to make it a little bit more of a contest. It felt like Ismail Benacer was an enormous loss as well from that Napoli side, from that Napoli performance, sorry. But in terms of talking about what went on in the Bernabeu the previous night, we want to hear from Kion Sabani, the chief editor and Real Madrid columnist of Managing Madrid. I asked him on his thoughts of the game.
I came away from that game with the realization that these are probably the two best teams in the world. And what we're watching really is a premature version of the final. It's a game worthy of the final. The level of football was so high and just so gripping from start to finish. It was impossible to take your eyes off it. And that's something I think got lost in all of this. So many people, a lot of people outside of Spain in particular, had kind of written Real Madrid off, as they typically do in this competition. And Real Madrid, as they also typically do in this competition, they showed up absolutely fearless. They went toe-to-toe with Manchester City. Were arguably slightly the better team. If you take in the totality of the 90 minutes, they were probably the better team in the second half for sure. And I think it was really encouraging for Real Madrid fans to see that. I mean, obviously, the second leg being at the Etihad is something that Real Madrid fans aren't used to, if you take in account the last couple of years. But from a talent perspective, they have the best winger in this tie. They also have people who can really step up in defense and midfield. And I think what is probably the most underrated thing that's happening this year as opposed to last year, whereas everyone said that City's team has improved so much and Haaland is obviously there, he's a freak. One thing that is going unnoticed is that Real Madrid's starting 11 is actually better this year because Camavinga and Rodrigo are a part of it. And one thing that Real Madrid didn't have last year that they do this year is Rodrigo's presence as a third attacker, which helps Vinicius and Benzema attack and create space and drag defenders away, and also have another potent counter-attacking weapon, which they didn't have last year. So that's something to take note of. And the other thing is that one thing that Real Madrid fans had circled in preparation from this game, they are missing Eder Militao, suspended obviously. David Alaba, who did have a good game in the first leg, was a question mark. He wasn't 100% match fit, but they got him back in time. Big questions were asked of Rudiger. Can he finally step up? Can he finally be the Rudiger of Chelsea that Real Madrid fans thought they had signed? And he stepped up, biggest game of the season until now against the best striker in the world in Erling Haaland. He passed his test, and they will look at that for the second leg. I don't know if he'll start because Militao will be back, and Ancelotti never deviates from Militao and Alaba unless there's an emergency. But Rudiger certainly made a case for himself in that game. So I think Real Madrid fans came away from that feeling encouraged, optimistic, and now with a realistic shot at making the final. Although there's a lot of work to be done. This is obviously the Real Madrid perspective of things. But either way, I think not only was this Real Madrid's biggest test of the season, the best team they have faced, but I think it can be argued that this is also Manchester City's biggest test.
Thank you very much to Kian there. Some very interesting points made. Cannot wait for that second leg at the Etihad next Wednesday. It's going to be absolutely epic. We wanted to start a little debate to kick off the show, though, which we saw numerous news outlets talking about. And it was who has achieved more in their career so far, Erling Haaland or Vinicius Junior. And I know, Henry, you've got a strong opinion on this.
Well, I should be careful when I enter into territory with Vinicius Junior. But I do think that the idea that Haaland has achieved more than Vinicius at this point in his career is bizarre. I mean, I know he scored a serious number of goals for someone at the age of 22, Salzburg and then Dortmund side. But I just think if Vinicius had moved to Real Madrid before he was a teenager, we would give him so much more credit. But because he went when he was so young out of Flamengo and he sort of slowly blossomed into this world-beating superstar, I think Joe said it, like, he maybe underrated in terms of being a world-class winger. He's probably one of the three best players in the world at the moment. And he has been for a while. He scored the winner in the Champions League. People seem to just forget that Real Madrid won the Champions League last year. He's been amazing. He scored 7 in the competition this season. He's not a striker, so he's not going to have the same striking record as Haaland. But his impact on every game that he seems to play at the moment is amazing. Even against Osasuna, they looked terrified of him in the Copa del Rey final. I think just... he is, without doubt, the star player for Brazil now. For Brazil. A country which produces world-class players like nothing else. It's incredible what he's achieved for this Real Madrid side. And then we see him pop up with a beautiful goal against Manchester City. In the last season in the semi-final, he terrorised them. I remember the nutmeg on Fernandinho, burst through, scored an amazing goal in that competition there. I know that what Haaland is doing is incredible, but he's not achieved what Vinicius has achieved in his career, and to say that Haaland on the back of, yes, I know he's had a very good strike rate at Borussia Dortmund, but to say on the back of one incredible season at City that he's far and beyond the likes of Vinicius, I think is just bizarre, because I think Vinicius is technically a much more gifted player. Haaland is just probably one of the greatest beasts in the final third that we will ever see. But yeah, I just think technically, as a pure all-round footballer, you can't say that Haaland is a better player than Haaland is a better player than Vinicius.
Fair enough. I mean, which side of it do you come down on, Mikhail?
I mean, I think it's weird to compare them anyway, because they are different
clubs as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, Erling Haaland. I mean, you say that like, I mean, it's. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Vinicius has been at Real Madrid since 2018. He's won 2 La Ligas at least, won a Champions League. Yeah, Haaland's only come to a real world beating club in the last 12 months. So, I think, his goals record at Dortmund was pretty amazing, given that, he was playing in comfortably the second best team in that division. And yeah, I just think, he's broken the Premier League goal record. Like, he's broken the record that was set when, there were 22 teams in the league. It is completely insane. And his Champions League, like, he will just be, probably the Champions League's all-time top scorer, like, well before he retires, fitness permitting. That I guess that's the issue, isn't it? But so far at Man City, he's been squeaky clean despite his kind of injury issues at Dortmund. So yeah, I find it feels like a weird comparison to me. I think, like, if you're going to compare Vinicius to anyone, it's going to be Mbappe, because they play in a similar position, they have a similar skill set. Like Vinicius, yeah, for sure. Like, as a dribbler, like, he's almost always been world class. Like, even before you reformed your views on him last season, Henry, even before he really started producing the final third, he was still one of the best dribblers in Europe. I think it was 1920 he only scored 3 in the league, but like, I remember him playing against Man City in the Champions League that season and being Real Madrid's best player. Like, he has always had that in his locker. And yeah, it's a difficult one. I think, like, Vinicius is clearly better at that side of the game. Like, Haaland is better than anyone in the world in terms of his movement in the box, in terms of his his eye for goal, in terms of that instinct to get on the end, in terms of his physicality, his ability to bully defenders. I think those are still kind of technical traits in many ways. It's just a different, it's just a completely different game. Like, I mean, yeah, they would suit playing together. I find it weird. I found it weird to compare, but obviously Vinicius has achieved more so far, like Champions League and 2 La Liga titles. You can't sniff at that.
I should add, the thing that I saw that has triggered this debate was should Vinicius be considered along with Haaland and Mbappe as the best players in the world?
Yeah.
And my point is no. Vinicius is already at that level. It's more Haaland who should be considered among the elite. Benzema, Lewandowski, which he obviously is. But the idea that Vinicius has suddenly elevated himself into the top category is what kind of annoys me about this debate. He's already been there, and that's the thing.
Are there that many people that put Haaland in the top category of all-round players in the world? Like, I can't really imagine that there would be, really. Even though, he's more similar to Ronaldo and Messi's more similar to Mbappe, or vice versa. You feel like with Ronaldo, he had far more to his all-round game than Haaland does at the moment. But it's still phenomenal how good a goal scorer he is right now. Yeah. And, he'd probably be in the top 5 or 6 players in the world. But I think Vinicius, in terms of an all-round player, as you've already mentioned, would already be ahead of him. I think what could make this debate more interesting in a few weeks is if Haaland is the main man that leads them to a treble and, catches up, does some of the damage trophy-wise as well. Because Vinicius has already played a key role in the Champions League and those La Ligas, as we already said. But anyway, guys, we want to hear your opinion on that debate. Haaland or Vinicius Junior, who has achieved more in their careers so far? Are they at the same level? You know the gist. Right, we are going to get into the main segment of today's show, because we are now halfway through the Champions League semi-final. So we wanted to get a little bit reflective on the tournament so far and actually talk about the most disappointing players of the competition to date. And I'm going to kick off briefly with a quick mention of Fikayo Tomori, because it was one of the hot topics at the end of that game last night about whether Southgate was right all along to not include him over Harry Maguire, etc. I think that's just such an easy thing to write. Like, it's just such 90-minute analysis. No one really taking in what's happened over the previous 3-4 years. Maguire has slipped way behind his normal standards. Tomori's been magnificent for Milan. Yes, he hasn't been as good as last year, but none of their defenders have. I think Kalulu's dropped off slightly. I think Kier's dropped off massively. It was interesting, actually, in the build-up to that Lautaro Martinez penalty, which I don't know why it was such a big talking point. There was very little contact whatsoever. Anyway, the way he managed to flip the ball beyond Kaye and dummy between them so smoothly. Tomori has not had a great Champions League campaign. He had a really difficult game earlier in the campaign as well against Chelsea, but responded quite well in that Napoli second leg.
It was great against Spurs as well.
It was great against Spurs. It's not been a complete disaster, so the Twitterati need to get off him. In my humble opinion. But let's move on to some of the bigger names that have also been suggested. So Nintendo and Bele, 30 McCub, suggested Robert Lewandowski. Would you put him in this most disappointing category?
Well, I think in terms of what Barcelona wanted from the Lewandowski signing and what has happened, I think you could say he has had a bit of a disappointing season. You know, he was signed to help them challenge on all fronts. You know, they had such a big window last year, and I know he came in on a free, but you know, big wages, and you know, was largely expected to score 25. Probably expected to score 30 plus in all comps at the very least. But you know, went out in the group stage, of course. And to be fair, this is the thing. I feel like it's a bit harsh on Lewandowski. I feel like it's just because he was brought in to do a certain thing. And in many ways he was let down by his teammates. Like he scored 5 in 5 appearances in the group stage, but he did only do that across 2 games. He got that hat trick in that opening win against Victoria Pilsen, and then got a brace in the 3-3 draw with Inter. But that draw all but sealed their fate. I think they would have had to have beaten Bayern Munich quite considerably in that. In the game that followed in order to get through. And he was quite quiet in the loss to Inter. He was quite quiet in the second loss to Bayern. He took just 3 shots across those 2 games. But he still averaged a pretty good kind of shot record across the group stage. But I think when you look at his La Liga form as well, it is clear that there's been something missing from him this year. He's still the top scorer in La Liga on 19, but he's only netted in 3 of his last 10 appearances. I think his expected goals per 90 is around 0.75, which is his worst record since 2014-15.
Wow.
So like nearly 10 years. That was his first season at Bayern when he only scored 17 in the league. I think he's only scored less than 25 in the league once since then, and this season could prove to be another one of those seasons. But at the same time, I think if we're going to look at Champions League in particular, and we're obviously going back a way now, like who can actually remember what happened in the group stages? I certainly couldn't before we started researching
Pre-World Cup,
pre-World Cup feels like another era, doesn't it? You look at the kind of the key players at Barcelona in those games, and like, I know he's very young still, but you have to look at someone like Pedri, who's been, Barcelona's best player across the last 3 years. Very, very little influence. And I know he's been injured second half of the season, and that's had a big effect on the squad. But I feel like someone like Pedri probably could have stepped up more in those big games. In the group stage, especially given he's one of the key creators in the side. There's a reason why Lewandowski wasn't getting those shots off. Like he does, he's not like a 28-year-old Lewandowski anymore, where he can just carve out chances by himself on demand. Like he does need to have that kind of delivery. I think that the whole, the functioning of that attack just wasn't really good enough. I think, look at someone like Gerard Pico didn't play an awful lot, but he, was, had a really poor game in that 3-3 draw with Inter, which was crucial to them going out. I think it's harsh to put it on Lewandowski, but I think in terms of like, what
the risk taken with the deal,
I think so in some ways, or at least just what Barca would have expected. Like, this is a guy who is, one of the greatest players in Champions League history in terms of his goals record and in terms of what he achieved at Bayern Munich especially, and even before at Borussia Dortmund he was brilliant in the Champions League for them. I think people will have been disappointed at the fact that he wasn't that difference maker in the end.
Fair enough. To clarify, I should have said at the beginning, we are going to go through all the examples and then we're going to rank them at the end. But yeah, an interesting case for Lewandowski. I'm not totally convinced that he deserves to be top of that list either. Henry, let's move on to Caps Lock suggestion of Karim Benzema.
Yeah.
What do you make of this one?
I don't think this is a good inclusion either, in all honesty. At the end of the day, Real Madrid are in the semi-finals. So it's not as if the team has suffered in the fact he's only scored 4 in the Champions League this season, 1 assist. I should add that all of his goals have come in the knockout rounds. So essentially, he stepped up when it's really mattered. I can't quite remember who was in the group stage. I think it was Celtic at one point.
Shakhtar and Leipzig.
Yeah, okay. So they've got the quality in the team to get through those rounds. And they had, like, Vinicius Junior's got 7 this season. Rodrigo got 5 in the competition. So they've got other guys that have stepped up this season. When he's had a injury hit time as well. He's had like 8 different niggling issues from what I could see on Transfermarkt. He's missed sort of almost over a dozen games this term. So he's not been able to always hit his full flight. But he's still one of the most prolific shot takers in the entire competition. Madrid are still, I think only Bayern and Napoli were taking more shots than them throughout the whole competition as a whole. So Benzema stepping up in the latter moments of this competition, scored 3, I think, against Liverpool across the 2 legs. So his problem is he's maybe hamstrung by the fact he got 15 in the competition last year. Like, that's such an incredible result. But then the year before that, he got 6. I don't remember everyone saying, Benzema was terrible.
Back,
so he could still feasibly end up with 6 in the competition this season if Madrid can get through the next round.
I feel like he's having to live up to what he did last year, which was maybe the best individual Champions League performance we've ever seen from anyone. Like, it was so ridiculous what he did last year at Real, wasn't it?
I agree. But as I said at the start, they're still in the semi-finals. They're still here. They're still right where they need to be, and he's in pretty good form. His league record, it's kind of like the opposite of Lewandowski in terms of the way that he's turned it on at the latter stages in the competition. By the way, if Lewandowski wins the best La Liga player over Griezmann, I will be furious.
He won't, will he? Surely not.
Well, he might do, knowing the way how simply they give it out. Griezmann has been the best player by a country mile. But Benzema, he's got 17 in 21 La Liga appearances. That's amazing as a goal return. He's got 3 hat-tricks and 3 sort of braces in 2023 as it is. And he's also scored 4 in 5 Copa del Rey games, which they won the competition. So it's not as if he's having a bad season. Pretty much all the minutes he's playing, he's doing well. He still rarely loses possession in the Champions League. He actually sees a lot less of the ball, which you would imagine, certainly in the latter stages. But his key passes are still pretty high up. People forget he's not just all about scoring goals. It's about his link-up play. It's about bringing in the wide men. He's so crucial to that side, beyond just scoring goals, which makes it even more impressive. He scored 15 last season. So he's fine. He could still have a huge impact in this competition, couldn't he, over the next few games. I don't think Benzema has been a massive disappointment at all.
I agree. I mean, if they get a penalty or something in the second leg, I would feel ultra confident with Karim Benzema stepping up to take it. I think he's just made for the biggest moment. So, well done, guys. Defended the El Clasico big boys very well there. Sadio Mane might be difficult to defend, to be fair. Yeah, get him, Jiggy. So this came in from Caps Lock as well. And obviously, he came in last summer, and he was the Lewandowski replacement, or that was at least the idea. Didn't really materialise that way. I think Choupo-Moting's had a better year than him, despite recent injury issues. Signed for a pretty hefty amount of 32 million euros. Not massive, but that could potentially rise to over 40. And his wages were pretty sizable as well. I remember thinking that it was around 80 million over 3 years as an investment. So they've really gone for it with Sadio Mane, and it hasn't worked in any competition, let alone the Champions League, to be honest. I mean, 12 goals and 5 assists in 36 games doesn't sound as bad as it's been, to be totally honest. But 8 of those goals came in his first 15, and he's only had 4 in 18 since. So his season has gone completely flat. And in recent weeks, it's really been Serge Gnabry or Leroy Sané or Kingsley Coman has probably had the best year of all the forwards at Bayern, to be honest. And Tuchel has given him a fair amount of minutes as well. He's played at least 60 minutes in each of their last 3 games. He's got over 80 minutes in 2 of those games. So we can't just pretend that it's the change of coach that's affected him. He's just looked like he doesn't have that much connectivity with himself, his body. He doesn't look like he has any connectivity with his teammates, really. And of course, there was that incident after the City game, slapping Leroy Sané, drawing blood from his face. Then he got suspended. So I think this has got to really be up there with the most disappointing player of the Champions League so far, and potentially of the season, really. But I'm interested to hear the other suggestions as well, McCubs. And we're going to start with Jeff Styles' 101s of Raheem Sterling.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, Raheem Sterling actually his record in the Champions League this season was all right. Like 3 goals and 1 assist in 637 minutes. He's
big goal against Dortmund.
Huge goal against Dortmund that got them back into that tie, didn't it? And he has, had great Champions League campaigns in the past. I think his experience was, part of the key to getting into the quarterfinals, which a lot of people wouldn't have expected them to. We certainly backed Dortmund, didn't we, ahead of that tie, and that's kind of the one crowning moment really of Graham Potter's tenure was actually getting them into that semi-final, into that quarter-final. Sorry, but despite that, when you look at his underlying numbers, they're pretty poor in that group stage, and it wasn't like they had the toughest group either. 1.1 shots per 90, only 1 key pass per 90. When you compare that to the previous season at Man City, and yes, I know it's Man City. I know Man City, last year were probably the best team in the world. Even then, he was averaging 2.6 shots and nearly 2 key passes per game in the competition, and that was when they were going deeper in the competition as well. So Sterling has had a poor season, and I think his drop-off makes Mane's look pretty good, actually. He's only got 4 goals and 3 assists in the Premier League this season. It's a huge drop-off, but at the same time, again, I feel like there's other people to look at in that Chelsea team, namely Mason Mount, and I know he's got a lot of stick this season. Over his career, Mason Mount has got too much stick, but he has had a poor year compared to previous standards, and he was almost non-existent in the group stage. Again, he's had injury issues and whatnot, but he just hasn't caught fire at any point this season, has he? And given how important he was to Chelsea's Champions League campaigns of the past, though he was absolutely class last year, obviously was a key player in them winning it in 2021, I'd be more keen to point the finger at him, even though he played less minutes than Sterling, just because Sterling was kind of coming into a very dysfunctional attack, having been in a very functional attack before. I feel like it's harder to put blame on him given that he's been in kind of unfamiliar circumstances. His role has been a bit misguided, I think. I don't really know what his role is in this Chelsea team even now, whereas Mount, despite change of manager and everything, I think Mount is one of those players who doesn't necessarily need a clearly defined role. He's always been able to influence games no matter where he's been on the pitch for Chelsea, and this year we just haven't seen it.
Fair enough. A late entry for Mason Mount, worth considering for sure. I think. Henry,
maybe I'm being harsh. Maybe he did play less than 500 minutes. But
yeah, I think everyone that has been watching this video so far would have been shouting the name, Henry, of Dayot Upamecano.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to defend him to start with. In that Bayern, until they came up against City, had actually had a pretty amazing Champions League defensively. The only goals they conceded was a double against Pilsen for some reason. They shut out Barcelona into PSG over 2 legs, dominated PSG over 2 legs. I actually think De Ligt was probably the better of the 2 centre-halves. So when you look at that, you can't really look at a defender and say, oh, he's been bad up to that point. However, that double leg against Man City, Upamecano, and I don't like to bash young defenders, but that was one of the worst defensive displays over 2 games that you will see. I mean, guilty for at least 2 goals, gave away a penalty, just looked very, very shaky the whole time. Second leg didn't complete a single tackle, interception or clearance. I was reading that apparently City actually targeted him for his poor positioning and ball control, and we saw the poor ball control in the first leg, didn't we? Remember, this is a guy that used to love dribbling out. That was his big thing at Leipzig, wasn't it? He was a really sort of forward foot defender, get out, looks quite modern, but he's got almost like reversed a little bit in his time at Bayern Munich. I almost think him and De Ligt are maybe too similar in sort of profile of defender, sort of too bullish in the way they play. But yeah, he was really, really bad. But yeah, almost lucky to have a red card rescinded in that second leg too.
Yeah, against Haaland.
But you don't just become a bad player overnight. I think he just had 2 absolute stinking games at the worst possible moment against the worst possible centre forward for it to happen against. And yeah, he did derail Bayern Munich's performances. They should have scored a few times over the 2 legs. Leroy Sané, who I thought was excellent, but had to put some of his chances away. So they weren't helped by the lack of finishing, but he really did derail at the back. And I also thought Jan Sommer looked so shaky that does sometimes feed into the confidence of the centre halves. So he wasn't certainly helped by Sommer behind him. It's interesting that Upamecano has been missing for the last 2 games, which Bayern have won. We've seen Pavard go in, and Pavard, such a versatile, more of a complete footballer, really, isn't it? And it's interesting to see that him next to De Ligt is maybe a bit more of a balanced partnership there. So I'm worried about how much football he's actually going to play across the end of the campaign. But we're talking about a guy that was involved in the French World Cup squad all the way to a final. It has to go in just because at the biggest moment he had a horrific 2 games. You can forgive 1, but 2 games, it's not good enough.
I think. Yeah, it's unfortunate in that he was the player who was targeted in terms of that area of the pitch. But yeah, I don't think Sommer gave him any favours. I don't think Pavard alongside him actually, when he was playing at right back in those games, was very good either. Like, I seem to remember him being almost completely hapless in terms of trying to stop. Was it Mahrez who was playing on the left that game? I might be wrong. It might have been Grealish actually. It might have been Grealish who was giving him the run around. So like, I think but. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you're saying, Henry, if you're a Champions League centre back and over 2 legs, you have 2 stinkers. It's it's always going to be bad news. And it's not the first time either. Like, even when he was at Leipzig, I remember, I think it was when United beat Leipzig 5-1, I think it was, at Old Trafford. Upamecano was, again, the player who was being targeted. So he does have it in him. It's weird because he is still one of the best young centre-backs in the world, in my opinion. But he does, like in some big games, he does have the ability to switch off.
Yeah, for sure. I remember at Leipzig, I think he played on the left-hand side of a back 4 or back 3, really. And now at Bayern, he's playing on the right. Maybe that's slightly messed with him for this season. Also, it's going to be difficult for him to get back in the side once Lucas Hernandez comes back as well, given the financial commitment they made there. But maybe Bayern would be looking to cut their losses on Lucas Hernandez just because he can't stay fit. So it's going to be really interesting what Bayern and Tuchel do with their centre-backs next year. But De Ligt seems like the guy that's really established himself as the main man there now. Right, Gregorish's TH has suggested Harry Kane. I'm just going to do this one very, very quickly. I think this is quite harsh. I mean, he was playing for a very, very poor Spurs side that really didn't turn up in the competition. I mean, their XG per 90 as a side was 1.25, which ranked 22nd out of 32 sides. And given the sum of the calibre of sides at the lower end of those groups, that's really pretty bad. I mean, he got 1 goal and 2 assists in 8 games. His expected goals was around 0.45 per 90, which is only marginally less than Gonzalo Ramos, who had some great games for Benfica. And Spurs were just a massive disappointment, made a very easy group, or at least a very easy group on paper, look incredibly difficult, only qualified through at the last minute thanks to that Pierre-Emile Højbjerg winner in the 95th minute against Marseille, then drew Milan in the last 16 and barely threw a punch. I think they got 5 shots on target across the 2 legs, most of them coming away from home in that first leg, and then that second leg in the pouring rain in the North London, that was absolutely miserable. So I think there's better candidates across the board. I think there's better candidates at Spurs as well. I mean, Kulusevski, really disappointing, had 4 shots in 200 minutes, created 4 chances, sums up his season. I think he's been actually woeful. It's kind of gone under the radar how bad he's been, given how spectacular he was in his first 6 months last year. And then Eric Dyer as well. I think he's just proven this year that he's probably not quite a Champions League leading centre-back, let's say. I think he can get away with it in the Premier League, but I think he's looked very shaky. And some of their decision-making in terms of Pape Matar Sarr as well, had that great game against Milan, wasn't really seen again, either in the League or in the Champions League. So I think there's been a whole host of things that have gone wrong at Spurs. So to say it's Harry Kane as their most disappointing player just seems absolutely mental to me. Quickly, guys, any of these other shouts we've got down here? Henry, do you want to mention anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, people forget how bad Atleti were in the competition. I think Koke, 0.8 tackles, interceptions per 90 in the group stages. They finished bottom of their group containing Porto, Brugge and Leverkusen. That is shocking. Certainly
it's mental given how good they've been in the league recently.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember how bad they were at the start of the season?
Yeah,
they were so bad.
It's a Jekyll and Hyde season for them. And even Brugge, I mean, great at the first half, certainly in Europe, and now kind of becoming a bit of a joke in the last since January. So I think Koke was really poor. I don't understand what was going on first half of the campaign there. So I think Koke is a good suggestion, because I do think Atletico were unbelievably bad this season.
Yeah, definitely in the Champions League. McCubs, anything from you just quickly before we do a ranking?
I mean, at Ben Mattinson, I think has a really good chat with Dusan Vlahovic. Like had almost no influence in the group stage. Juve finished their group with just 3 points. Like, I mean, that's truly disgraceful. And again, a little bit like Atleti, they've really come alive in the second half of the season. But they were, up until end of October, they were so bad in the league and in the Champions League. I think he averaged less than 3 shots per game against Benfica and PSG. Vlahovic, he created just 1 chance across the competition. So, like, I mean, he just really struggled to make his mark in any way.
Do you think that's Allegri? Because that was when people were calling him like a dinosaur manager.
Yeah,
for
they
the
were.
first half.
They were bad. Like the whole team was bad, but Vlahovic is a £70 million striker. Like you still expect more from someone like that, and especially in a group. When you've got like Maccabi Haifa there, like I mean, yeah, you've got to expect more. I also think PSG have kind of got away with it. This episode, I think there's a few players there, like Verratti's obviously dropped off a bit this season.
I thought Messi was very bad against Bayern, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the knockout stage, I feel like when you look at the numbers, it's like because Messi and Mbappe were so good in the group stage, you're kind of like, you can't really argue with the kind of numbers they were putting up there. But it's true, like that whole forward line was pretty poor against Bayern, and actually they missed Neymar, who actually produced a lot less in the group stage than Messi and Mbappe, but they really missed Neymar more so in the knockouts. So yeah, I mean, you could point a finger at a number of PSG players. I think in general, it's just a very disappointing campaign from them, given how strongly they started it. I think we were all looking at PSG as one of the 3 favourites to win the competition back in the group stages. And then I think Virgil van Dijk as well. I know Liverpool generally were quite strong in the group stages, but that first game against Napoli, I think it's a bit harsh just to put it on Joe Gomez. He did probably have the worst game of his career, but Virgil van Dijk was alongside him. That whole defence was a mess. And against Real Madrid at Anfield, he just looked completely lost. And I know, again, you can talk about Fabinho in front of him. I feel like we've just spoken about Fabinho to death this season. And I feel like Van Dijk hasn't got as much heat. So I just thought I'd put him in as a suggestion, because it really felt like, especially across those 2 legs, that it was Ibrahima Konate coming back into the side that really stabilised that back line. And it's just mad, when we're talking about most disappointing, not worst players, like Virgil van Dijk has been widely considered as the best centre-back in the world by a fair margin for the last 2, 3, 4 years, and this season he looks far from that, especially kind of before the last couple of months, and I think that Real Madrid game, he just looked like he really was properly struggling in a game, and you very, very rarely see that from Van Dijk. So I think he's worth a shout.
I think it's a worthy inclusion. Right, guys, it comes down to it. It's time to rank them. Henry, 3-1.
3-1.
What do you reckon?
I'll put Koke in at 3, just because someone from Atleti needs an inclusion. Oh, it's tough. I'm going to put Upamecano first.
Oh.
And then... it's tough. Sorry. Yeah, you know what? Koke, Van Dijk, Upamecano.
Fair enough. Late entries there from Koke and Van Dijk. McCubs, who do you reckon?
I think... I think Mane's got to be in there. I think you argued that point very well, Dukes. Let me see. I can't remember who actually we spoke about. Mane, Karim Benzema. Yeah, I think I'll put Mane in there. I'll put... So, yeah... you know what? I might put Koke top. I think he was truly awful in the group stage. Koke top, Mane, and then rounding off, I'll put someone else who made the knockouts. Maybe, you know what? I might actually put Harry Kane in there, because I do think across those 2 Milan legs, like I know he was trying to do a lot of work, but like. Yeah,
not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, when you say they didn't throw a punch, like Harry Kane's the guy to throw that punch, right? And I think in the group stage as well, actually, at points it was even Son who was been really out of form this season, who was a more dangerous threat. I also saw him sky a penalty in the final moments against Eintracht Frankfurt live. And that was a shock to me. That actually, it was foreshadowing that
what happened about a month later.
Yeah. So a bit of a personal one from me there, but yeah, Harry Kane.
Fair enough. I'm going 3 Dusan Vlahovic, 2 Upamecano, and 1 my main guy Sadio Mane. on the season. Do like Mane, but hasn't done it for Bayern so far. Guys, how would you rank them though? That's the crucial question. Get your thoughts in the comments down below, and let's move on to our big match predictions. Okay, it's time for big match predictions, and as we always do to kick off the section, we just briefly review last week's results. So Roma versus Inter Milan, I went 1-0 to Inter, my Cubs went 1-1, Henry went 2-1 Roma, it was 2-0 to Inter, so 1 point to me. Lens versus Marseille, my Cubs back Marseille, I went 1-1. Henry believed in Lens, saying 2-0. It was 2-1. 1 point. Yeah, very close.
Close to 3 points as well. Very close.
Indeed. And Dortmund versus Wolfsburg. We all backed Dortmund, but we did not see that 6-0 drubbing happening. Could have been even more with that Adeyemi penalty miss as well. So that's 1 point to all of us. So the scores are as follows. I'm on 60, Henry's on 48, and McCubbs is on 41.
We may as well give you the trophy now.
Well, come on, guys. There's been bigger chokes. What we had? 3 games to go, 4 games to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, it needs to happen now. 3 pointers from you guys all the way through.
Yeah.
Right, Bayern versus Schalke is the first game we are going to preview. Saturday, 2:30 p.m. First versus 15th. 35 points between them. It's been a magnificent few weeks, Henry, for Schalke.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the relegation teams are sort of turning up at moments right now. I mean, Stuttgart and Hertha both won as well. But yeah, Schalke, the problem is for Schalke is their final 3 games are Bayern, Eintracht and Leipzig. Eintracht, who haven't actually been great in the league, but do have that.
And Glasner now leaving.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's confirmed this week.
Goodness. Well, they've got, at least you can go out on a high with the final of the DFB Pokal. But yeah, Schalke, they have turned it on. Beat Mainz 3-2 at the weekend. 102nd minute penalty. 12 minutes of injury time.
Yeah, it was a long old VAR delay.
Yeah, my goodness. And they've won 3 of their last 4 games. 2 points clear of Stuttgart in the relegation playoff zone, which looks like it could be against Hamburg again, which would be another epic clash. Really hoping that Hamburg can get back up.
Yeah, that'd be
so
fun.
strange they've been down there for so long. Or St. Pauli, let's see. But yeah, I think I kind of want back Schalke to get a result here.
Love
but
it.
The problem is because Bayern have nothing else to think about. I almost think that they've got the opportunity. This will either be like a really comfortable Bayern win or a draw. I'm going to go for 1-1 on this, but I really am not that confident.
Fair enough. I mean, McCubbs, are you thinking more of the drubbing?
No, I was going to go for a 1-1 as well,
Really?
actually.
Go for it.
I'll do a 2-2 instead. Why not? Maybe it will come in this time. I just think, I know it's at the Allianz, but I just think Schalke are in great form. Bayern have picked up form as well, but I still have question marks about that defence. We've spoken about it already on this show. I still have question marks about their defence. I know Tuchel is probably a better defensive coach than Nagelsmann, and they've only conceded 1 in the last 2 games, but not been playing particularly esteemed opposition. I know Schalke have tons of flaws as well, but they are in great form, and this is a huge game. And I think it would be a real statement from them if they were to get a result at the Allianz. Doesn't mean they will, but I'm going to go for it 2-2.
Fair enough. I mean, the record between them is pretty one-sided, guys. They've won 11 straight games versus Schalke, scoring 36 goals and conceding 2.
Nice.
I mean, but I love the backing. I wish I could join you guys. I just don't think Schalke can back up so many wins, go to the Allianz. If it was at home, this would be slightly different for me. But I think Bayern get over the line and they do it quite comfortably. I'm actually going to go for a 3-0 Bayern.
I think that's fair enough.
There we go. Right, let's move on to Inter Milan versus Sassuolo. Saturday, 7:45 p.m. 4th versus 13th. 19 points between them. There's not that much on this for Sassuolo McCubbs, but this is massive for Inter.
Yeah, huge. I mean, they're obviously, what we're saying, in great form at the moment. They're in 4th place. Are they 2 points above Milan
2 points above
now?
Milan in 5th, yeah.
So, I would back Inter at this point to go and take it. However, they do have some really big games coming up. They've got Milan next. They've got Napoli, Atalanta and Torino. I mean, that's a tough run of fixtures, especially given that Atalanta are back in the mix for top 4 now as well. But I just think they're in great form. They look as dangerous as they did at points last season, which was the best team in Italy. Yeah. They probably are the best team in Italy at the moment, actually, thinking about it, in terms of their form, in terms of the way they look when they play. Like Napoli have kind of understandably dropped off a little bit as their title procession has kind of neared its end. They are drunk. They are drunk, and who can blame them?
No, absolutely.
So So yeah, I think Inter will get this done. I mean, I know Sassuolo are in decent form as well, and Berardi in particular is in fantastic form. Scored a great goal on the weekend. But yeah, I just think Inter will have too much for them at home as well. I think I'll just go for a 2-0.
Fair enough. Henry, see anything different?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Inter's saving grace is they can rotate that squad a little bit. They can just bring in Brozovic, De Vrij, Aslani, even Correa. They've got like options to rest the big players up front, and
didn't start Lukaku as well.
Yeah, exactly. Lukaku too. So yeah, that's where they could Gosens. They could. Like
he says that all the time.
So yeah, but I mean, yeah. That said. Quick note on Sassuolo, they've had such a high turnover of players once again, Scamacca, Traore leaving, so I do think that maybe next season is the season for them, and they are looking exciting. Ormond Loriente is one to watch too. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory to Inter here, but yeah, I think Sassuolo have a lot to look forward to in the next 12 months.
For sure, and not just a high turnover of players, but high turnover of pretty good managers as well. De Zerbi in the past, Eusebio Di Francesco, and now Alessio Dionisi, who's pretty highly rated as well. I'm actually going to go for a draw for this. I think Inter might just be a little bit tired. I think last night would have taken a lot of emotional energy out of them. I'm just going to go for a simple 1-1. Right, let's move on to our final game, which is Monaco versus Lille, Sunday, 4:05 p.m. Yeah, you did hear that right, 4:05. I don't know why it's kicking off at that time, but anyway. Fourth versus fifth. There are 5 points between them. This is tricky, I think. This is tricky. I mean, McCubs, your thoughts?
Yeah, difficult one. I think Monaco probably come into this in slightly better form, or they do. I mean, Lille lost to Reims on the weekend. If you haven't seen Cabella's miss from 2 yards out, I recommend that. Apparently, an XG of 0.96. So yeah, a bit of a
he's had a
disappointing.
Season,
he had a good season. 7 goals and 9 assists. He scored some absolute bangers as well, hasn't he? Yeah, so unfortunate for him.
I wonder whether that's the highest XG miss of the season. It must be up there.
It's got to be. It's got to be up there, hasn't it? Like, especially it was on the ground. It's not even like a header or anything. It was just like, it's mad. And I guess it technically on target. I'm not sure because it does get cleared now. It probably would have hit the post, wouldn't it, if it actually made it through? Nevertheless, Monaco. I think I'm going to back Monaco here. I just think they're. Boadu scored on the weekend. Golovin got a great goal as well. I think he's now got more, as a Russian player, he's got more goal involvements in a season. Sorry, the most goal involvements for a Russian player in a top 5 league in a campaign since Andrei Arshavin in 2011, which is pretty mad to think.
The season that Arshavin did the 4 at Anfield.
No, I think it was a couple of seasons later actually. It was actually kind of post peak Arshavin, but he just was still producing quite a lot. But yeah, pretty mad actually. I mean, I guess it just goes to show actually that Russia hasn't produced that many great attackers in the last 10 years. Golovin really kind of stands head and shoulders really in terms of someone who's really cut it at a consistent rate. And he's still only 26, so he's still kind of approaching his peak in that sense. So yeah, I'll just go 2-1 Monaco. I think. Actually, you know what? I might just go for a draw here. They're on paper they're pretty evenly matched. I'm going to go for 1-1.
1-1. Fair enough. Henry?
No, you go.
Okay, I'll go next. I mean, from what I've been reading, I actually haven't caught that much Monaco in recent weeks, but their defence has taken a bit of a step back, I think, since Badiashile left in January. Lille, Fonseca's side's always really entertaining going forward. Jonathan David's put together another magnificent campaign. I think this has got goals in it. I'm going to go 2-2.
Ooh. You know what? For a laugh, I'll go for Lille. So we've spread our bets across the 3.
Love it.
I'll go for a 2-1 victory to Lille, but I agree, it could be more goals.
Absolutely perfect. Guys, thank you so much for watching Continental Club for this week on our new home of Football Daily. If you want to catch up with what's happened to Euro Football Daily, we released a quick video on that on Euro Football Daily last week, but this is where we'll be for the time being, every Thursday afternoon, hopefully on time, ready for the Europa League ties, kicking off in a few hours' time. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Lots of love from the 3 of us. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.